After Kevin warned Dalton that he shouldn't bid on the herbal medication that was up for bids because it was too old to be effective, Isaac started arguing with him. They drew a lot of attention, and Zane Pearl walked over with his guards to warn them that they would be thrown out if they started any trouble. When Zane realized that Kevin and Dalton were friends, he backed down and walked away. After they all sat down again, Isaac whispered to Phoebe, "Why did you help this piece of trash just now? He needs to be taught a lesson." "Did you forget what I said to you earlier?" Phoebe said as she glared at Isaac. Then she turned around and gave Kevin a strange look. Phoebe liked Kevin a lot, but she still had to say something to him about this. "Kevin, can you stop saying foolish things like that? The Pearl family is famous all over Chicago. They would never put anything up for auction that wasn't the very best you could find," Phoebe said very nervously. "If Isaac got you kicked out, who would help me appraise my antiques?" Of course, Phoebe didn't really care about that. She was more worried that if Kevin was chased out, it would be very difficult for them to ever see each other again. Kevin didn't answer Phoebe's question. He only nodded his head a few times. Meanwhile, the bidding had reached its peak. The bids were up to $45 million, and there weren't many people left who still had enough money to join in. Suddenly, an older man raised his paddle and said, $60 million. The room fell silent. They all looked over at the man who was dressed in a slightly old-fashioned pinstripe suit. "I can't believe all these people think this is so valuable," Kevin said to himself. 60 million going once, 60 million going twice, sold for $60 million, the auctioneer said as she banged the gavel on the table. "Congratulations to the gentleman in the pinstripe suit for this unique purchase." Suddenly, the entire room burst into a boisterous round of applause. But a lot of people were uneasy about it. This older gentleman looked unfamiliar to them. As far as they could tell, he was virtually unknown in the Chicago business world. But they did agree that he couldn't be an ordinary person if he could afford to pay this much. The auction house staff carried the box over to him and opened it. The man took one of the herbal pills in his trembling hand and sighed. "I've been looking for something like this for almost 15 years. Everyone who saw him do this held their breath. Does he really know what he's doing? Kevin wondered. Then a young woman said excitedly, "Congratulations, Grandpa." She looked like she was in her early 20s, and she was extremely beautiful. Her grandfather nodded excitedly and took the herbal pill right away. When Kevin saw this, he said to himself, "This isn't good. Something horrible is going to happen." "Gee, Kevin, didn't you just say that this batch of medicine would be useless? That guy looks okay, doesn't he?" Isaac said mockingly. He had deliberately raised his voice so that the people around them could hear him clearly. However, before Isaac could finish what he was saying, the older gentleman suddenly let out a strange moan. Then his eyes rolled up into his head and he fell to the floor twitching. "Grandpa, what's wrong with you?" the woman said as she knelt down next to him and started shaking him, trying desperately to wake him up. Everyone started to wonder what was going on. Was this a side effect of the herbal medicine that the man had just taken? They all turned their heads and looked at Kevin. This was exactly what he had predicted. Even Phoebe looked at Kevin in disbelief. Isaac was disappointed to see Kevin proven right and slumped down in his seat. He couldn't believe it and thought it must be just some kind of coincidence. When Zane heard all the commotion, he hurried over to the stricken man and asked his granddaughter, "Ma'am, does your grandfather have any health problems?" "What are you talking about?" she asked coldly. "My grandfather is in perfect health. There must be something wrong with the herbal medicine you just sold him." Everyone felt a chill run down their spines and no one dared to look her in the eyes. "Ma'am, I can understand your feelings, but there has never been a problem with anything this auction house has ever sold," Zane replied. "So you're saying that this is my grandfather's fault?" she asked him. Then she shouted, "Someone please help us!" 5 or 6 men in black suits immediately ran over from the entrance. They moved so fast they were like a blur. "Listen carefully," the young woman told Zane. "If my grandfather dies, I'll definitely bring the Pearl family down." Ma'am, it's just too early to talk about all of that. Let's get your grandfather to the hospital so they can check him out. Just don't try to blackmail us, Zane warned her. Do you think I'm joking? The woman said as she opened her wallet and showed them her ID. When Zane saw her ID, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't realize, Zane said apologetically. Kevin was standing too far away to see what she had flashed at Zane, so he turned to Dalton and asked him, Do you know what that is? I'm not sure, Dalton said seriously, but it looks like the Pearl family is in big trouble. Kevin raised his eyebrows slightly when he heard this. He never thought he'd witness something like this at an auction. I'd advise you to move quickly, she told him. Yes, ma'am, Zane said as he quickly turned around and barked orders into staff. Quick, call an ambulance. I'm afraid it won't get here in time, Kevin said gravely. Please, Kevin, don't say anything else, Phoebe urged him as she anxiously tugged on his sleeve. Dalton didn't speak, but he stood next to Kevin, ready to help him no matter what happened. Who is this guy? You think he has any idea what to do? One of the bystanders asked. Lower your voice. Don't you see who's standing next to him? That's Dalton Steele, someone whispered to him. As everyone watched, Kevin walked over to the man and announced. He was poisoned by that useless expired herbal pill. Even if he was sent to the hospital right now, it wouldn't help. But he only swallowed it a couple of minutes ago. The poison hasn't spread to his internal organs yet, Kevin explained. Then he turned to look at the woman and said, If you trust me, let me save your grandfather. But we can't delay any longer. You really have a way to save him? She asked incredulously. Don't trust him, he's just a good-for-nothing, Isaac suddenly blurted out. Then he added, Kevin, stop pretending you know what you're doing. When the onlookers realized who Kevin was, they remembered all of the awful rumors that Jason had been spreading about him and began to have their doubts. They started whispering all sorts of insulting things. This gave the young woman some misgivings, but when she saw the confident smile on Kevin's face, she decided to trust him. I'll let you try, she said. Then she warned him, but if something happens to my grandfather, I'll hold everyone here responsible. Of course, Kevin responded. Then he turned around and asked for a bottle of water as he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small vial of herbal powder. Kevin had kept some of his antidote that he'd given Miranda. He thought it might come in handy someday, just not so damn soon. The older gentleman was in bad shape, but he was semi-conscious and still able to swallow. Kevin poured the powder in the water bottle and shook it gently. Kevin! Phoebe nervously called out as he leaned over and held up the man's head to give him a sip. Don't disturb him. I'm sure Kevin wouldn't do something he wasn't confident about, Dalton said firmly. Zane nervously looked at Kevin. His forehead was breaking out into sweat. After a few minutes, the man's face started to look more normal. Even his breathing got smoother. Everyone who was watching this was amazed at Kevin's skill. Kevin slowly stood up and smiled. Your grandfather is out of danger now. With some rest, he should be all right in a day or two. Thank you, the woman said as she heaved a sigh of relief. I'll definitely repay you for your kindness. After saying this, the woman had her companions carry her grandfather out of the auction hall and out to their waiting SUV. That wasn't so great, just dumb luck, Isaac scoffed. But Dalton wasn't too happy to hear him say this.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.